Hello, friends. Who's ready for the last week of content? This is all I have for you guys. I'm excited. Let's see. You have a good long weekend? Yeah. All right, let's get started. Question about the final. Yeah. Why long weekend? Because we didn't have you share is better instead. Um, yeah, for the final, um, I guess study previous exams. Do you guys can you see that? I'm not really sure. Do you guys have access to those or what? So I would, whatever you did to study for the previous exams, I would just kind of mix it up with that. That would be my recommendation. I mean, they're the same like style questions, but not the answer choices. Oh, okay, gotcha. So you don't know what the correct answers are? Did it show you what the correct answer was after you took the test? No? Okay. Um, yeah, I don't know how to put them in like review mode. Um, do you need the correct answers to study? Maybe. Um, it would be helpful. Yeah, I mean, I get that. Let me see something real quick. Um, yeah, I mean, it's not like overly complicated. There's a lot of this section that we're about to go over, the chapter 27 stuff on there. Um, I would focus more heavily on that and then like some generic stuff from the previous tests. Um, some weird questions on here that I'll probably change and I'll make them kind of generic. Um, yeah, I mean, study answer choices and questions. Yeah, so I asked Dr. K about that today. A couple people asked for like a study guide. Um, which I'll be honest, if I have time to pull them together, I'll pull them together. But I make no promises. Dr. K said that her recommendation for her final is the syllabus stuff, like what all the stuff that's on the syllabus and the chapter outlines. So if you've done the chapter outlines and been keeping up with them so far, I think you'd probably be in a good position. If not, then you probably have some work to do. Um, As far as like what's on the final, yeah, I mean it's a lot of chapter 27 stuff. It looks like it's 56 questions, so probably 60 points, and then like some of the like most basic stuff, like what is like some of like the Krebs cycle stuff, some of the um hormone stuff. There's like endocrine, like knowing what hormones do what. There's like general stuff about how the digestive system works. Uh, yeah, nothing crazy. So I wouldn't. Yeah, syllabus and chapter outlines. I think if you stuck with syllabus and chapter outlines, you're gonna be in a good spot. So if you've been getting good grades on the tests and that's what you've been doing, I would stick with that. Um, respiratory, yeah, there's respiratory out there, but it's again like basic stuff. When is this class gonna be over? Yeah, I asked myself. I'm just kidding. We're gonna go over chapter 27 today, and then next week we'll do some review session stuff. The week after that's Thanksgiving, so it's off, and then the week after that is a final. So that'll be on Tuesday, probably. I think. I'm still going to talk to Dr. K about that, but apparently there's like a Respondus live proctoring option thing that I have to do. So we'll just meet here like normal time, and then we'll take the final. So that's it. So to answer your question, last day will probably be like December 3rd or 4th. So, but we'll get there. Let's go over reproductive stuff first, and then we'll talk about finals and study guides and stuff a little bit next week. Fair warning, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be more guided through what's in the outline, so we don't have to know. Maybe I have to. I have to think about that because I can't just be like, "Hey, there's no questions on this, so don't even bother." Right? Um, let me look at them. I'll get back to you. Like I said, if I can get a study guide together, I'll give you guys a study guide. But no promises. All right, reproductive. Let's go over this real quick. That's what others have done. Yeah, I mean, if I had one ready made to give to you, then I would give it to you. I'm giving you everything that I have been given. So we'll work on it. Okay. All right. Let's see. Slideshow. What also we don't need to know. Yeah, I mean, I'll look at it. Let's see where do you all right for the meeting. Okay. Fair warning. I don't love these slides, so I'll probably drag over a couple images and stuff so you guys can see. If so, I'll make them big and then like you can screenshot on the recording and stuff too, so you have like access to them. Okay. All right. Reproductive system. Sorry, brain farting on the word. Okay, so ovulation is they always like to throw in random stuff here. Let's go over the male reproductive system first. Okay. So the male reproductive system, it includes all of these structures. So you've got the penis, obviously, which has different parts to it, and we'll kind of go over those a little bit. There's also the testes and the scrotum, right? Um, and then you've got the prostate gland, which is here, which all of that's connected by the ductus deferens, and you've got seminal vesicles, and then a couple muscles and stuff that all are involved in the male reproductive system. So basically, the point of the male reproductive system is to generate sperm and expel it, pretty much. It's pretty simplistic. There's not a whole lot of complicated stuff to that, okay? Let's go over it. So the scrotum testes, from an external point of view, you have this like middle line right here called the raphe. And then on either side of that, you have cremaster muscles. Okay. Those are these muscles right here that are kind of longitudinal. And then you have dartos muscles, which are, they kind of make up the outside of the scrotum. Okay. And then the deep tissue layers, we've got a plexus of the testicular arteries and veins right here. So we've got a nerve artery vein coming through here. And then there's a ductus deferens on either side of it, right? And then there's the testes and the epididymis on top. And then there's a little bit of lymphatic right there. And then we've got autonomic nerve right here too. So that's parasympathetic nerves that are coming through here. Okay, so nerve artery vein, testes epididymis, and ductus deferens. This whole thing, the nerve artery vein and the ductus, that this all makes up what's called the spermatic cord. Okay, so if you were to get like a question that was like, what is not part of the spermatic cord? Like the urethra would be the answer, right? Because we're just talking about all of those things that are involved in there. Okay. All right, the testes. So inside, let's just say this is the same one. We have this section right here, which is the epidermis. Okay, there's a head and there's a body and there's a tail. Okay, just like the pancreas or stomach or whatever. And the point of that epididymis is it produces or it has like a maze structure, right? And this is where sperm matures, okay? But first, it's created in the testis itself, okay? So it kind of like if it forms down here and kind of makes its way up these tubules, which there's like different subsections of those, but they all kind of do the same thing, kind of like the kidney think of. And then they make their way to the straight tubules and into the epididymis where they mature. Okay. All of these, like septum tunica, albuginia, all these things, we're going to go over these a little bit later in lab, but just know for the purposes of like the testes, sperm's created here, it matures in the epididymis, and then it moves down into the ductus deferens and on out, okay, and into the spermatic cord and out, okay. So let's talk about spermatogenesis first, okay? So if we remember from general biology, we've got mitosis and meiosis, okay? So this is the process by which our cells are regenerated, okay? So in meiosis, which is what produces sperm, we're basically putting the genes in half, right? So if we have a what is this? A parent cell, right? It's going to go through mitosis, and that will produce two primary spermatocytes. Okay, each of those is going to go through meiosis one, and you're going to have a secondary spermatocyte, and then meiosis two. Right. So if we remember from biology, we're going to take the DNA of those. Hang on one second. Dragging stuff over. Is that blurry? Well, please. I like this one. Okay, this will work. All right, so if we're going to go through meiosis, we're going to let's say we take one of these right here, right? This primary spermatocyte, that 2N, okay? It's going to go through meiosis where all of the DNA is going to line up and then it's going to divide in half, okay? So it'll duplicate and then divide, and then it's going to divide each of these in half, okay? So you're going to end up with 4 daughter cells right here that each have half of the DNA chromosomes that the parent cell did. Okay, so we're copying, we're dividing those copies. So in meiosis 1, we have basically the same amount of DNA, right? And then we're taking those copied DNA and then we're splitting them apart into 1N meiosis 2 daughter cells. Okay, and those in males will become the spermatids, right? So these little cells that are generating here in the testes, and then as they move through these tubules and into the epididymis, they become spermatozoa eventually. Okay, so this is the maturation process. Okay. If this is a cross section of a seminiferous tubule, so this part right here, you've got a lumen right in the middle, just like you would like a blood vessel. And then you've got early spermatids, and then they're making their way out, and they are kind of starting to mature. And as they make their way out, they'll end up in these little capillaries and into the tubules, right? Like those straight tubules. And then from there, they'll start growing tails, just like a frog. Grows a tail and then loses it. So think like embryology of cells, right? So they'll grow that tail, and then that tail will start walking around. They can swim up and out. Okay. All right. That is spermatogenesis. So again, this is kind of like breaking that down. So you have mitosis, which is just copying it into 2 daughter cells, 2 diploid cells. And then in meiosis, you're going to go through basically mitosis twice, right? So you have prophase, metaphase, interphase, telophase, and you're going to end up with the daughter cells, which are going to divide again, okay? And then you're going to end up with haploid cells, okay? So these have half of the chromosomes of this parent cell, okay? Cool. One other thing real quick. I don't know if you can quite see it on here. Let's see if we can see it on that other picture I'll show you. No, but this one, you can kind of see it. Okay. Here in the prophase section, right? So where these line up right here, what you're experiencing right here, you see how there's like a little bit of red and then some blue, and you can kind of see that crossover right here, the red and the blue. Those 2 duplicate chromosomes are crossing over, and chemistry is happening between them, right? So we're actually flipping. They're trading DNA, okay? So you're not ending up with all identical chromosomes that are being copied because they're right next to each other and they're taking up a lot of space. You end up swapping DNA in different chromosomes with different daughter cells. Okay, so all of these, once you kind of go through this whole process, these are all individual. Okay, you've got millions and millions of uh, sites on your chromosomes that do something different, right? And so if you swap them all over, this could be the difference between like, you know, your offspring having blue eyes that haven't showed up in your family in, 3 generations, right? Like that's what is causing that, this recombinance right here, where they're just swapping DNA. Okay. So you can kind of see that a little bit in these photos with the red and the blue, but just know that these haploid cells are all unique. Okay, they're not direct copies like they would be during mitosis. So over here you don't experience that. Over here you do. Okay, and it's a direct result of the bulkiness of um, like that double copy, right? That exists right there. Right. So just for purposes of what this is, um, just the reason for cell division and mitosis is just growth, repair, maintenance, just normal bodily functions, right? Like cells break down, they get dissolved, they get built back up again, right? For meiosis, we're strictly forming gametes. So we're forming sperm or eggs, okay? There's 2 divisions in meiosis and 1 in mitosis, right? We can see that. So meiosis 1 is the first division, and then you end up with those daughter cells that divide again and create haploid cells. And we have these synapses of homologous chromosomes. So this tetrad formation, which is what this is right here, there's crossover, and that's what we were talking about, where the DNA swaps, right? Result of mitosis is 2 diploid cells, so 2 copies of 23 chromosomes, right? So you have 46 chromosomes in humans. And then in haploid cells, it's just a single copy of 23. And the reason for that is because those are eventually going to meet an egg, hopefully. And when the sperm meets the egg, it combines its DNA, and that is how you end up with an embryo. Okay. So these mitosis results are genetically identical, and in meiosis, they're genetically different due to crossing over and random fertilization events, right? So like one sperm, which is different from a different sperm, could end up with one egg, which is going to experience the same crossover effect and have different DNA than the next egg next to it. Okay, so completely random. There's like trillions of combinations that could occur based off of 2 parents. Okay, let's talk about sperm anatomy. Sorry, I don't know what my voice is at today. You have a head right here, and then a mid piece and a tail. Okay, and then the end piece is just the end of the tail. All right, so in the head, you have what's called an acrosome. So the acrosome is this like outer layer, and that is what will eventually like punch its way into the egg, right? Like it swims headlong straight into an egg, and then the acrosome gets kind of secreted around the egg, and that's what allows the sperm to release its DNA into the egg. Okay. There's a small plasma membrane around it. There's a nucleus within it, right? And so that nucleus contains the haploid DNA. And then there's a centriole, which kind of holds everything together, and mitochondria right here in the mid piece. So this whole thing right here is mitochondria, and then the flagellum, which is what forms the tail, is mostly filaments. Okay, so think like if this is mitochondria, this is like myosin, right? It's not, but think the same way, like active myosin or filaments. These are filaments as well. I think they are actually, they might be active. Let's see. Sperm filament is atubule extensions. Oh, it's active. Okay, cool. Yeah, it is active. That's what I thought. All right, so this is just active right here. So and it creates like it's almost like a corkscrew effect. It's not like, they're not just like swimming like a fish. This this anatomy creates like basically a turbine right here, and it spins around those filaments. So it's corkscrewing through the water. It's not, or not the water, through the seminal fluid. It's corkscrewing. It's not like swimming like a fish, and it's also not doing like any random crazy movements, right? It's not. There's like a corkscrew effect to it. Okay, and this all this does is provide motility. That's all it's doing. So we have a nucleus with DNA, and the whole point of this entire thing is get that nucleus to an egg. Okay, that's it. So it's aerodynamic and it's got mobility. Cool. All right. Um, so the male reproductive system. We talked a little bit about how the urinary system is like there's a lot of crossover in it, right? Especially in the male reproductive system. Right. So that sperm is created in the testes, it matures in the epididymis, and then it ascends through the ductus deferens into the prostate. All right. From there, it meets the ampulla of the ductus deferens and the seminal vesicles. This is where semen is created. Okay, so all of that happens, and this is the urinary bladder, right? So that happens like next to the bladder, and then you have the prostatic urethra. So there's a part of the prostate, or there's part of the urethra that goes through the prostate that's not part of the reproductive system, and then you have like a combination of those two. Those two tubes meet. This goes through the ejaculatory duct, and then you have the last half of the prostatic urethra that goes out of the prostate and into, and then it becomes like just straight up urethra. Okay. So you have different sections. So you have the prostatic urethra, you have spongy urethra, which is this part, and then you have your urethral opening at the end. Okay. And your membranous urethra is right below the spongy. Okay. All of these little glands right here, so your seminal vesicle, your bulbourethral glands right here, and your prostate, all of those, all they do is add like seminal fluid. They adjust the pH of the fluid. They add, there's like little additives that get put into sperm to basically just optimize it, right? Like there's a protein that makes it sticky, right? There's a protein that makes it like kind of thinner so that you can, so it'll actually be able to travel through, right? And the whole point is like the sperm needs to like get in there and then be able to swim all the way to the egg, right? So you're kind of optimizing that process throughout, and then eventually it will make its way out, right? Okay. This is so eventually you've gotten it into the urethra, right? And this is a penile cross section. Oh, one thing I did want to talk about, because there's a little link right here, this vasectomy link, which you can totally read and know. But one thing to know is here, right? A vasectomy, you're just cutting this ductus deferens part right here. So it's not like castrating a bull, right? Like you're not cutting off this whole thing. It's just that ductus deferens. And the reason for that is because we have this plexus of veins and arteries right here. You don't want to kill the testes completely. You just want to block where the sperm can come out, okay? I think that's an important distinction to make because a lot of people get that confused. Okay, penile cross section. So you have this spongy area of the penis, right? And you have two different areas. So you have spongy corpus spongiosum, which is like this middle part, and then you have corpus cavernosum, which is like right here. Okay. The reason it's spongy, and it really is spongy, like if you do like a cross section, it looks like a sponge, is because of these arteries right here. So you have these cavernosal arteries down here that dilate, and it fills this whole thing with blood, and that's what makes it erect. Okay? So this deep dorsal vein is really more in arteries, is really more to kind of get blood up to here and around the outside, but the erectile function is mostly the cavernosal arteries in here. Okay. Um, your urethra is also like surrounded by the corpus spongiosum and not the corpus cavernosa because you don't want to fill up that space and harden it and cut off the urethra, right? Like you want to be able to get stuff through there, right? It's just a delivery system, right? Amazon Prime. All right. So let's look at that real quick. There's three different stages, okay, of that process. So during arousal, which is like the beginning of that stage, um, obviously, you guys, I don't need to explain to you what arousal is, I don't think. But from a physiological standpoint, you should know that it's a parasympathetic innervation of the penile arteries. It's stimulated by nitric oxide. Okay, so if you ever look at like the chemical makeup of Viagra, you're it's causing your body to produce more nitric oxide, right? And that's what kind of gives it the erectile function. Okay. And so that nitric oxide is a vasodilator, and it will relax the muscles in the arterial walls, which when we talk about those arterial walls, we're talking about these arterial walls, right, in the cavernosal arteries. And the blood flow will increase, the vascular channels become engorged, and the erection occurs, right? It also stimulates all of the glands within the reproductive system and kind of produces more ejaculatory, I guess. Okay, so you're not just sitting with like ejaculate at all times, ready to go. You're creating arousal and then you're producing during that process. Okay. During emission, you eventually hit like a point where that parasympathetic response creates a sympathetic activation that causes the emission. And it begins with the peristaltic contractions of the ductus deferens. So we're going to squeeze, right, the sperm along the ductus deferens and into the urethra, where it's going to meet all of the seminal fluid that's been produced by the urethral glands right here. And then, so we're kind of moving that ejaculate into position, right? And then during emission, the secretions enter the urethra and mix with the spermatozoa. So semen is formed during that process, okay? So you're not just sitting there with like a, uh, you're not sitting there with a bullet in the chamber, I guess would maybe be a good way to put it. It's, you got to make it before, and that happens like right up to that, okay? Okay. Okay. During ejaculation, and the reason we kind of hit that threshold and become sympathetic is because we're gonna employ skeletal muscles during this. Okay. So during the ejaculation portion, the ischiocavernosus and bulbal cavernosus muscles will start the rhythmic contractions, and that will kind of squeeze the ductus deferens and kind of produce that same peristaltic movement, and it will push the semen towards the external urethral orifice. Okay, so it's ejaculating right there. Okay, and they kind of do two things. They are pushing it out, but they're also stiffening the penis as well. So you're making sure that it doesn't like, I guess soften would be a good word, because you don't want it to fall out. Like it's got to stay in position. Okay. All right. So semen analysis. It's slightly alkaline, right? So if our normal pH of our blood is 7.4, right? It's like a 7.2 to 7.6. There can be anywhere between 2 to 5 mils per ejaculation. A normal sperm count is 50 to 130 million single cells per milliliter of ejaculate. So about 5% of that ejaculate is sperm, like actual sperm. Okay. Of that, really only 60% of them are moving around. The rest of them are just not all the way complete, right? They have not matured enough. They're not uh, normal. Like they've got something messed up with DNA. 40% of them don't even have flagella, right? And if all of that goes well, they can live up to 48 hours after ejaculation, right? So sex education, pay attention to that. Okay? And the reason it's 48 hours is because they got to make their way through a bunch of tubes to get to the eggs. Okay, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. So to be considered sterile, right, you have to have less than 20 million sperm per milliliter. Okay. All right. Testosterone production. So the male, and the reproductive system is not just for making babies, right? There's other like functions of it too. Testosterone isn't necessarily like testosterone and estrogen aren't necessarily like male hormones versus female hormones. They're not what makes you male or female. They're just found in different concentrations in males and females. Okay, so having more expressed testosterone or estrogen is a result of genetic occurrences that produce males and females, if that makes sense. It's not the other way around. You do kind of use testosterone and estrogen to drive that into one direction, embryologically speaking. But again, it's not like the end all be all. Like if you're a man, you have testosterone. No, that's not really how it works. I picked a good day for actually talking about testosterone. All right. So how it's produced is first the hypothalamus releases gonadotrophic releasing hormone, right? So that GnRH, which stimulates the anterior pituitary to release FSH and LH, right? So that's right there. And the FSH makes its way to the Sertoli cells, right? And the LH makes its way into the Leydig cells, right? And this is happening in the reproductive system, in the reproductive organs, right? And it will produce testosterone that will be released and cause a negative feedback over here. Okay, so your hypothalamus will pick up on that extra testosterone. It'll go, okay, too much, and then it'll back up. Okay. This is also regulated by inhibin, right? So inhibin negatively feeds back to the anterior pituitary. So we're going to cut it off here, and we're going to cut it off here. Right? So we have processes that are duplicate in order to kind of slow down that process and have a better homeostasis. Okay. All right. Any questions about the male reproductive system? Nope. Okay. Cool. Awesome. It's pretty simple. Go figure. Female reproductive system. A little more complicated. All right. So there's two parts of the female reproductive system. So the first is the breast tissue, right? And obviously we know what that's for. It's to produce milk, and we'll use it later. But before we get to that point, we also have the uterus and the whole female reproductive system. Okay, so the female reproductive system starts with the uterus right here. That's kind of like a U-shaped organ, or like a T-shaped organ. And it's got like a lumen in the middle and then two caverns on either side, okay? Ideally. And I'll get there in just a second. The egg cells, right, the oocytes, are produced in the ovaries. They make their way through the fimbriae. So the fimbriae are like these little projections that an ovary will release an egg, and the fimbriae will kind of pick it up and pull it in. And then it goes all the way through the uterine tube into the uterus. And if it's fertilized, it will implant itself into the wall. If not, it'll pass through the cervix and into the vaginal canal and out during menstruation, right? All of this is held in place by this broad ligament, right? So there's like a ligament right there that holds it. And then there's ovarian ligaments that hold the ovaries in place. So the ovaries are like free floating, they're their own thing. But they are definitely kind of like tapped into place by some ligaments. Okay. Keep in mind, this vaginal canal, right here, is at a different angle than the uterus, right? Like it's not all like one. It kind of looks like it right here, but it's actually at a different angle, and it's all kind of posterior to the bladder, right? So you have your pubic symphysis, which is a bone, and then you have your bladder, and then you have your uterus, and then the ovaries kind of sit behind the uterus and up above it. Okay. And then you obviously get your rectum right there, right? So all of that fits into like one space. It's not like male reproductive system that is like spread throughout. Right. All right, let's talk about the ovaries. So the ovaries, like I said, they kind of sit and do their own thing right here. You've got different layers to that, which again we'll get to a little bit in lab. The sperm enters through the vaginal canal and into the cervix and kind of makes its way up here looking for an egg, right? So all 150 million of those sperms are looking for a single egg that's been released. Ideally, it's one egg that's been released, okay? So that egg is produced in the ovary and then it gets released right here. And then you see these little fimbriae, they've got the little dangly things. They're literally just kind of like snagging the egg. And the egg will make its way down the uterine tube. And this whole thing is called the infundibulum. It will make its way down the uterine tube through the ampulla, into the isthmus, and into the fundus of the uterus right here, where that sperm will be like kind of hopefully hanging out waiting, right? So if you're not really sure, like if you can't match up the ejaculation phase and the ovulation phase completely, that's why they kind of hang out and they live for 48 hours in there. Okay. So you have kind of a broad window to become pregnant, right? The uterus is lined by this endometrium, right? So there's cells right here called endometrium, and then the myometrium. Myometrium is superficial to that, and then the very most superficial is the perimetrium. So the outer layer is called the perimetrium. Okay. All of this is supplied by the uterine artery and vein right here. And then you have ovarian artery and vein for the ovaries, and then you also have a vaginal artery and vein right here that supplies blood supply right here. Okay. All right. This is the external anatomy. Just another bad picture. I don't know why. I don't like that picture at all. But if you were to kind of pull back the labia majora right here and the minora, you've got you've got the vaginal opening right there. So it's right here. You have your urethral opening, and then there are some glands on either side that provide secretions for lubrication, right? And then you've got the glands that kind of loop their way over here. And then you've got the bulb vestibule right here, the corpus cavernosum. So again, analogous structures. You've got a labia minora, which is kind of the inner layer right here. a precipice, which is that top portion, and then the glans clitoris right here at the very top. Okay, so this is all external anatomy, and this is all internal anatomy. So this sits on the external portion. Okay. All right. Breast anatomy is not super complicated. External, we've got an areola, right? And then we've got areolar glands that kind of sit on either side of them. And in the middle, there's a nipple right there, okay? The whole function of the breast is to provide milk through these alveoli. So the milk's produced here in the alveoli. It's surrounded by fat tissue, okay? And then it flows down. Think like again, like the kidneys, where you have the major calyces and minor calyces. It's just flowing down into these sinuses, which are called lactiferous sinuses. Okay. There's lobules. So like there's a portion right here. This is going to be a lobule. And this contains multiple alveoli. And the breasts are held together with suspensory ligaments kind of intertwined between there, right? All right. What else? All right. Before we move on, I want to talk about uteruses again. I'm a male, and I feel like I have a platform to talk about uteruses. All right, uteruses. What if I told you that they don't all look like that? I got to Google it. So there are actually 20 normal variations of uteruses, and there is a specific picture that I'm looking for. Normal uterus. Is it this one? Okay. This is just for your own like personal enjoyment and ability to nerd out on anatomy so that you can tell people this. But I'm going to take 2 minutes and explain this to you because I think it's really cool. So a normal uterus is this like V shape, right? So like there's or a T shape. So there's like these tubes on either side, and then there's this cavern in the middle, and then it goes all the way down. Okay, you can actually have variations of this. Okay, and this Wikipedia page is called uterine malformation, but it's not malformation. They're completely normal formations. Okay, so you can have a normal like T-shaped one right here. There's also like multiple vaginal canals in a normal uterus, right? There's what's called an arcuate uterus. So it's like a thicker cavern right here, and then it thins on the uterine tubes. There's a uterus subseptus. So this one has like a little septum right there, and then a bigger septum. And then that can combine and create what's called a bicornuate uterus. So you can have two normal uteruses on either side and the uterine tube sticking out. And then that can completely divide and create two completely different uteruses on either side, right? So normal variations of this. And then you can also have what's called an asymmetrical bicornuate uterus, which this one is attached to the uterine tube, and this one doesn't actually make it all the way. So just that left side, right? Just that right side. Or you can have what's called a unicornuate uterus, okay? And it's just that one side that has an ovary that's attached to a uterine tube. This side doesn't actually do anything, okay? Isn't that so? And all of these are completely normal. You find these a lot, okay? So this normally developed one, only like 35% of the population has that, okay? And then each of these, there's like, one of them is like 10%, 5%, 6%, 8%, all the way down to these unicornuate uteruses, and those are like 3% of the population. So when we teach uterine anatomy, just know that like this is what we would consider normal, but it's also not uncommon for it to not look like this, right? Like there's a lot of variation, and all of that variation can be completely normal. And so that can affect certain things, right? So let's see. Let me pull up the picture back over. Okay. So like think for instance, right here on this unicorn unit, if each month you're releasing one egg from one side, you might kind of have some pain when it comes from this side and it's trying to make its way and it can't get through, right? So that could reflect in a physiological sense, okay? Think if you have like two uteruses, right? Like this didelphys, the septated vagina, you could have a very heavy menstruation because you're shedding the wall of two uteruses, right? So like there's completely normal anatomy that happens within this that can have like pronounced effects on this next phase that we're going to talk about, the uterine cycle. Okay. So that can be affected, and oftentimes like you don't really know. I'll give you an example. My wife actually has a unicorn uterus, and we found out because she had a C-section, and the doctor was like, "Hey, look at that! No wonder your baby's stuck." Right? So all of that can completely happen in like normal settings, and it's very hard to pick that up. Like even on ultrasounds and like being able to image that, it's hard to even see that a lot of times. Okay, so that can affect different stages of what we'd call oogenesis and the menstrual cycle. Okay, so that being said, let's talk about oogenesis real quick. Okay, this is just we're just talking about eggs. Okay, and we are going to talk about that. All right. So uh, let's see if this little thing right here is age. This is the number of eggs that are available. Okay, so all of this happens before birth. Okay, so all the eggs that you're ever gonna produce are produced before birth. Okay, so we go through mitosis and we double up, right? We have those two daughter cells, and then meiosis one will arrest. Okay, so we'll go through a bunch of mitosis, and then we'll end up with all those daughter cells. Okay, after puberty, and they'll just kind of hang out in the ovaries. Okay, and this is what people talk about when they're like, a woman who is born, like, or what is it, like the grandma produces a mom who has the ovaries already built up for the granddaughter, and all of those three people can exist in the same like grandma, right? So, and that the reason for that is because all of this happens before birth. Okay, so all of these eggs are produced, and then this meiosis arrests. Okay, so it just stops the division. Okay, and then after puberty, we start producing these eggs. Okay, so they divide into secondary oocytes or polar bodies. Okay, the secondary oocyte is this is what becomes a mature ovum. Like this is what can be fertilized. This first polar body does not get fertilized, and the second polar bodies don't. Okay, so we're putting all of our energy into one mature ovum. Whereas the sperm, because they're smaller and are more simplistic, um, and they're just a DNA delivery system, you can produce four for every one, right? Whereas with ovums, you're going to produce one, and then the other three are going to be called polar bodies. Okay, so those eggs will become available right around here. Okay, so they start being available after puberty, and then as you release them, they'll kind of drop off. And then they'll also start to degrade as well. That's another thing that happens. Okay, we'll get there in just a second. During Down syndrome, you have a fetus with trisomy 21, which is three of the 21st chromosomes, and the incidence of that happens far more often with maternal age. I don't know why it comes up in there. General knowledge, I guess. Like I said, I don't love these slides. All right. So that oocyte is called a primordial follicle. Okay. Produce hormones. All right. So that primordial follicle will mature into an oocyte and then become a secondary follicle. Okay. This tertiary, and then it'll mature again into the tertiary follicle, and then that will produce this oocyte. Okay. So that oocyte gets released, right, during the ovulation phase, and it comes out of the ovary and into those tubules. Okay. Wait. And this is stimulated by FSH, so follicle stimulating hormone. Go figure. And then luteinizing hormone produces estrogen, which kind of helps us move it along. Okay. All right. Hormonal regulation of ovulation. I'm going to actually skip this for now, and we're going to come back to this. Okay. During the uterine cycle, let's look at this picture real quick. Okay. So if FSH is this pink line and LH is this purple line, you can see that they kind of stay in low numbers during this cycle. So this whole cycle takes 28 days. On day 14, just before day 14, you're going to release an egg. That's called ovulation. Okay. So you're going to have low FSH and LH. And then right around day 9 or so, you'll release the egg, and that follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone will be released, and that's what will cause the stimulation of the egg release, right? And then this happens on day 14 because it's got to make its way through those tubes, right? So it's making its way through those tubes, and then it eventually passes through the system. And at that point, you start to see progesterone being produced. Okay. And what that does is it tells the uterine wall, hey, they didn't get one this month. Go ahead and just shed the whole wall. Okay. So, and that's when we'll get to a point where we'll start menstruation. Okay. So if this, just kind of think of this like as like your guide when it comes to the cycle, the uterine cycle, right? All of these things happen on its timeline. So day 1 or day 0 is that first day in menses, right? Right when it starts shedding the wall. And that comes across as blood, obviously, because if this is the uterine wall, this is like cells. There's blood vessels here, so we're shedding that, and just kind of cutting through all of it to shed it. It's gonna bleed, right? So you're just releasing all of those cells that kind of line that wall, okay? So the follicle gets released, and then day 14. And then this is kind of what's happening on the next couple days. So it's degrading into corpus luteum, corpus albicans, and degrading corpus. So that follicle, the oocyte, is not staying like a perfect oocyte all the way through the system. Okay, it's being released, and it's like, all right, fertilize me, and then it just kind of degrades over time. Okay. So that happens. All of this is regulated by hormones, right? I don't go too crazy into these. I don't like these weird flowcharts, so I would ignore them completely. But just know that it's the hypothalamus releases gonadotrophic releasing hormone, which stimulates the anterior pituitary to release these hormones, and then the ovaries release the corpus luteum, and then they release progesterone, which stimulates the uterus to shed the uterine lining. Okay, so this hormone cascade and feedback mechanism, it happens in the same way in males and females, but in females it's on a timeline. Okay. So, and these different phases are called menses. So this is day one, you first start to bleed. And then once you're done with that, you start proliferating. So it's the proliferative phase. You proliferate this oocyte, right? And then the secretory phase, which is where it gets secreted out into the system. Okay. So estrogen, FSH, and LH all kind of rise at the beginning so that they can ovulate, right? And then they kind of drop off at the end. And progesterone is the one that will stimulate the start of menses again. Okay? And this is roughly a 28-day cycle. Again, everything's normal. There's normal variations. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter. Okay. All right, menopause. Menopause is the end of this. Okay. You don't go through this 28-day cycle anymore. It happens somewhere around age 45 to 55. And the reason it happens is because the ovaries have stopped responding to FSH and estrogen levels. Okay. And so since they're not responding, those levels will decline. The rest of the follicles will release, and all of your oocytes will just start breaking down from there. Okay. There's physiological responses and there's physical responses to that. Right. Regression of organs often occurs. I'll highlight that real quick. Estrogen is actually a cardioprotective hormone. So it's good to have estrogen, which is why you see the normal age, like the typical age for a male to have his first heart attack is somewhere between 45 and 55. And in females, it's somewhere between 55 and 65, which is after that estrogen level declines. Okay. All right, contraception. We're going to stop here. So just giving you guys a heads up. There's not a whole lot that we're going to go into super in depth on that one. Okay. All right. That's all I got for you guys. Any questions?